We really need people to show up for us. These hearings are brutal. And listening to things that people are saying about our kids, it is awful. And if even people were just willing to call or write and say, I don't know a lot about this, but I hate what I'm seeing, we would be so grateful.
Yeah.
Welcome to the East Anchorage Book Club. I'm your host, Andrew Gray. The purpose of this podcast is to tell the stories of Alaskans of interest and importance. This episode is part of an ongoing series regarding transgender rights. Today, our guests are Henry, a 15-year-old trans boy, and his mother. No last names will be given in the interest of their safety. The inspiration for this trans rights series is 3 bills currently moving through the Alaska State House. One which bans trans girls from playing girls' sports, one which requires kids to get signed permission slips approving their preferred name and pronouns, and one which allows doctors to be sued up to 20 years after treating a trans youth. Alaska has many big problems. The pressing need to increase the funding of our public school system and finding a solution for an imminent energy crisis among them. But instead of working on those very real, very substantial problems, we are spending the last weeks of session debating whether trans youth exist and have rights. They do exist. They do have rights. Henry, welcome to the podcast.
Hello.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm 15 years old. I'm a trans guy. I don't know.
How did you know you were trans?
I guess I've always known. It's never really been a big deal. It's like, if everything's fine, you don't notice it. But if it's not, you definitely know something's up. I don't know. Just being a guy, I'm just more comfortable. Wasn't a big deal until people made it a big deal. Like when I was younger and stuff, I was just kind of me and I just wore whatever I wanted. I don't think, like in hindsight, okay, yeah, duh, I was a boy. But I guess it just wasn't a really huge deal until I got a little bit older. Other people started making a big deal of it. The fact that I dressed more androgynous or whatever. The fact that I realized, oh, I'm uncomfortable with presenting more female. Like pretty much, yeah. I don't know.
And when did you tell your family, or when did you officially say, I'm trans?
So at my old school, it was like really hard. I was getting bullied a lot. People were making a really big deal out of it. I wasn't completely out as trans, but when people would be like, oh, are you a boy or a girl? I would just like shrug my shoulders. I guess I didn't come out with my parents until like about halfway through the school year when I was like pretty positive. And
Which grade?
it was 8th grade, I think. Yeah, 8th grade. My old school.
And was that a positive experience?
No. At home, yes, but at school, it was a problem.
So you felt like your family was supportive from the very
Yeah.
beginning?
Yeah. My parents were just like, yeah, that makes sense. And rolled with it. It was chill.
But school was not good. And so you ended up changing schools?
Yes. It wasn't until I think the last quarter that I was able to actually move schools because we didn't really know about any other schools, to be honest. It was just really, I can talk a little bit more about like the bullying and what it was like to be in a supportive environment if you want.
Sure.
So the big thing I'd say is that how people would deal with me being trans, like the school and like the people around me and stuff, it would be to isolate me instead of actually like fixing the problem. So it would always be, oh, people are messing with you in the bathroom. How about you just go to the nurse's bathroom? Which huge inconvenience across the school. Had to get like a bunch of passes, ask the nurse, and it's just a whole thing. And people were messing with me a lot during like lunch and stuff. So it was like, oh, okay, we'll just give you a pass to go eat lunch alone in some classroom or something.
Basically, the school felt like if this is a problem, it's because Henry is the problem, not because the students who are bullying you in the bathroom are the problem, not because the students giving you a hard time at lunch are the problem. It was like, Henry's the problem, we'll move Henry.
Yeah. Another big thing was the bus. Girls would be like recording me all the time. I'd get messed with a lot on the bus. And they were just like, oh, how about we just put you in the front of the bus? Or give you an assigned seat, which wouldn't have helped anything, to be honest. Or so a couple of girls that were really messing with me in particular lived like just a block away from me at my bus stop. So I would always have to walk to a bus stop 2 or 3 times further just to avoid them. Another big thing was like PE. I would get messed with a lot in PE, and I would have to go into locker rooms and stuff. So the school, how they dealt with that was just, oh, we'll just make you a library aide. You can just like, I don't know. The solution was never to deal with the people that were making a problem out of nothing. The solution was always that something's up with me, something's wrong with me. I need to be isolated. And that's just wrong.
And so you guys decided to change schools and you found a school that's more supportive.
It's day and night.
Really?
Yeah.
Tell us about how school is now.
I have to drive in an hour every single day. It's an hour away. Since I live, all my neighborhood schools are out of the question. I have to go to school in Anchorage. Yeah, it's a 45-minute drive there and a 45-minute drive back. Takes a lot of time, but as I was saying, it is day and night. I'm able to just be a kid in school, just do my schoolwork, not have to worry about getting messed with. I don't know. It's not asking for much, but it's lovely.
I want to ask you one other thing, if it's okay. The decision to get medical care and what that experience was like. I think there's a narrative that's being told a lot in Juneau right now in the halls of government that basically kids are being taken to a clinic and their parents are saying, my kid is trans, give them medicine, make them another gender. And I just wonder if you can speak to what the process is actually like and how that comes about.
Yeah, of course. I just like to say that is absolutely not true. I think people make way bigger of a deal of it than it actually is. So you can't even get surgery in Alaska for minors or adults either, I think. It's like absolutely out of the question. Like, it's just not happening. Hormones and like puberty blockers and whatnot, you have to go to many meetings. You have to be like absolutely sure. You have to have consent from both parents. I don't know, it was like 3 meetings or something. You have to have supportive parents. There's literally no way to get hormones, even if you have all the support and are clearly a guy like I am, and like absolutely not going to change the mind at all. Like, it's still difficult to get the hormones.
Did you know for sure that you wanted to do hormones? Was it something that was a very easy decision, or was it something that you had to think about?
It was a pretty easy decision for me. It was more of a just how to make my life easier. I kind of like all of the changes were just things that would make me more comfortable with myself. It's more of a like, why not? If I can just be more comfortable with myself and present the way I want to, what's the harm?
And did your parents want you to do hormones? Did you feel pressured in any way to
Not at
do
all.
hormones?
Absolutely not. It was all me. Obviously, I needed their consent, and they had to be supportive in order to get that consent, but it was all me.
Gotcha. Is there any last thing that you really want folks who are listening to understand about trans kids in Alaska?
But I'm just minding my own business. I'm not after anyone. Things are hard enough as they are. Like, I already have to deal with a bunch of stuff, and I understand that. I'm fine with that. It's more of just, we need legislation to not pass to make things worse than they already are. And we need people to just be more chill, not be quite so focused, because it's not as big of a deal as people might think.
Thank you so much for being on the show today, Henry.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Henry's mom, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself that you feel comfortable sharing?
Sure. I guess the biggest thing for us is I came to go to college back in the 90s and met an Alaskan. I'm originally from Washington State. Met my husband, and 20-something odd years later, we were happy to raise the kids here and make this a part of our community. We started a business and set roots. Looking, as the kids are getting older, we were looking at what the future would hold for us and for them. We still are very hopeful that the kids are going to stay close, and we're a very tight family, I would say.
You just heard me talking to Henry. There's that narrative that we hear that trans kids are made trans by their parents. I don't know if you can refute that in any way. Were you somebody who knew that you had a trans child? How did you navigate that first part of being a mom of a trans kid?
Yeah, it was gradual for sure, which probably was helpful that Henry never really fit into kind of those gender norms to begin with. And that wasn't a huge issue for us. Henry's just always been Henry. And so I think that made it easier. I think what was shocking to me is when we first started this gender affirming care piece and meeting other parents that were going through the same thing. The majority of the people that we know and are all just figuring this out and doing what's best for their families. And I think even if you were very much on board, I don't know a single parent that isn't getting outside pressure from their extended family or their coworkers or their friends. So it's not something you would push upon your child. I just don't see that happening. That's just, we all want what's best for our kids. We all want them to thrive and to be healthy. And a lot of the kids that are trans that are actually receiving medical attention, it's a small number of kids. They're the lucky ones in a lot of ways. There's a lot of kids that don't have supportive homes. And we know the statistics. And as a parent, you can't not take that into consideration and just ignore what's right in front of your eyes, that you've got this kid that doesn't fit that gender stereotype, and they're telling you, this is who I am, and you don't have a choice as a parent. You have to take that on. That's what we do as parents. We start looking for information. We start talking to people we trust. We start engaging with healthcare professionals, and just like you would with any other thing that your child might be struggling with or going through. Being trans in 2024 is not easy. And that was the other thing that caught me off guard was when Henry was little, of course I had those thoughts like, oh, what if one of my kids are gay or if they're trans, and how would we as parents react to that? I never thought that we would have a front row seat to this culture war and our kid would be at the center of it, and that we would be so villainized and people would be so interested in what we are or not doing in our private healthcare appointments. It's just wild to me.
Henry said it was a no-brainer to start hormone therapy. Did you have any hesitation or pause or concern that you might be crossing over into an area where you can't go back? Like that there might be some permanent changes that could happen that you were never going to be able to come back from?
Yeah, of course. It's a huge responsibility, and it's something that didn't occur overnight. It's something we didn't take lightly. It's hard to go back and imagine, like, even the mindset I had at that time. It's hard to put myself in that place because now it seems so obvious, and Henry's doing so well and just himself. And anyways, but when I think of, yeah, it was a tremendous responsibility. I think probably my biggest concern initially was like reproductive issues in the future. And the more we learned, it just is not the way that people portray it, this limited knowledge of what a trans person is and what that's going to look like in the course of their life is going to look like and what the specific treatment's going to be and what that's going to look like. It's all very tailored to the individual and what their individual needs are. It's not something that you would pursue if your kid was just not feeling confident about their body and wanted to tweak a few things. It's so much bigger than that. And I think 2, 3, 4 appointments in, either you've got the information you need to make an informed decision, or you would be like, this is not for us. I definitely felt very well informed. And they interviewed the kids as well. It's not like
You're making this decision for Henry. Henry was an active participant in the entire process.
it has to be consistent. It has to be pervasive. It has to be something that it's not like it could just be a fleeting
Phase.
yeah, I've got 2 kids. My other child is doing exactly what all teenagers should be doing as well, right? Exploring who they are as a person and doing all these things. I would not be making a gender affirming care appointment for them tomorrow had they said, I actually think it'd be great to have a deeper voice. to categorize it that way, it's just so dismissive of the people that are just trying to live their authentic lives. So for us, it was more, we're Henry's parents. It's more than clear to me that he's a guy. And so what kind of healthcare is my son going to need at this point? And weighing all of the different options, what is going to set him up to have the best future? And in many ways, it's been easier than I expected, which was a surprise, because I do think it's portrayed as you're chopping off body parts and, oh gosh, all the just.
Right. That brings us to the three bills. We have the No Trans Girls in Sports bill. We have the permission slip for name and pronouns bill. And we have the being able to sue a surgeon for any gender affirming procedure that happened as a minor up until 20 years later. I think the frustrating thing for me, having heard the bill, is that no one's listening when I say we don't do gender affirming procedures in Alaska. The bill doesn't really mean anything, but it's like a platform for folks who want to say, as you said, chopping off body parts, to be able to create some drama about something that's not even happening.
And if the kids choose to start a family someday, they're going to be able to do that. I'll leave it at that. That's not what this is. What frustrates me, two things. Now that I've met more trans kids and talked to other parents like us, you find that it doesn't matter what the bill is. For Henry, I would say not being able to use the men's room would be the nail in the coffin. For some of our other friends, it might be not having access to gender affirming care. For some people, it might be pronouns. For some people, it's just living in a community and knowing that people aren't out to get you and villainize you, and that you don't feel safe at home, and now you can at least be safe at school. Things have just gotten so spun out of control, and it's so hurtful and it's harmful to trans people. I don't care if it's a sports bill or if it's a gender affirming care bill. The thing about the going after physicians, though, that we're talking about human rights. We're talking about access to healthcare. We're talking about the government in our healthcare. We're talking about politicians making decisions not based on scientific evidence or a provider's medical reasoning, but on what the will of the people happens to be at that time, which I can't even begin to get there when people aren't even comfortable talking about this. We can't even have a open dialogue with folks about what this really is, and we're making these drawing
Two
these.
things. One is that for folks of my generation, it's possible that for them to go through their lives and not have talked to a trans person or knowingly talked to a trans person, to not have thought about this issue. They've managed to live in a world with a gender binary where there are men and women, and this is just outside their comfort zone because it's something they haven't thought about. I think there are a lot of people who want to just be able to ask some basic questions, but they're so afraid of being grouped with this very loud minority of folks who are saying, trans people don't exist. This is a mental illness, or that sort of stuff, that they don't ask the questions. And I think the left has its own issue of, if you ask a question that seems insensitive, then you're a transphobe. If we're not able to ask questions, we're not able to have a civil conversation.
Yeah, and that's, if I could make a plea to legislators, it would just be, this is all very new. There's a ton of information coming at everyone. We don't need to make these decisions right now. This isn't a problem in Alaska. It's okay to take a pause. It's okay to reach out to families and to trans folks and to have these conversations. It's okay to say you don't know everything. It's okay for parents to admit we don't all have the answers. But yeah, we don't have to be on this accelerated schedule. That doesn't make any sense. And it's very harmful to our kids. And we're experiencing, this is our kids' childhood. And we're feeling it in real time. And you'll hear from parents, but I don't know a family that doesn't have a backup plan for if Alaska goes sideways. And
Like, you have to have a plan for where you're going to go.
Yeah, and even then, people say Washington will take you. They've got their own issues and they're under their own scrutiny and they're struggling as well. And now they're taking all of Idaho's patients, and none of this is good.
Mhm.
And no one wants to be on the receiving end of this. Trust me.
The second thing I was going to say is that I think 20 years from now, we will look back on this and think, wow, what was happening then? Because I think that as people by default meet more trans people, have coworkers who are non-binary, just become more comfortable with this is not going to be that big of a deal. And 20, 30 years ago from now, we'll look back and think what was wrong with our society that we were having these debates, because I came of age in the late 80s, early 90s. And that was what was happening with gay and lesbian people. And now that just doesn't seem like that's that big of a deal anymore. And so I think the same thing will happen with trans people. I don't know if you think the same thing or
Absolutely.
Yeah. Although one thing is, I would really like it if I didn't have to wait until I'm 50 years old for everyone to be like, all right with trans people. Okay, you know what? Maybe we won't make legislation that actively harms you. It would be cool if we could just eat up the process a little bit.
right.
And not to mention that things aren't great for gay and lesbian people now either. It's not everything's perfect now.
But it's all relative. Henry's mom, do you have anything that you want to end with? Anything that you want our listeners to know?
I would just encourage people. It's uncomfortable, but to have more of those conversations. And for some of our friends and family that are now a little bit further along, I hope that they can start having those conversations too. And we can find some common ground here, because I really don't think it is the big, scary issue that people make it out to be. Like, raising teenagers is scary, right? I get it.
Right. I like what you just said about your sort of extended friends and family being willing to have these conversations. Jenny Armstrong serves in the legislature with me, works since West Anchorage. Yesterday in caucus, she said, hey, and I'm getting out some secret material, but I don't think anybody listening will care. She said, hey, I really want 3 people to do a special order about what's happened in the Capitol this week. And she's like, I don't want it to have to be the queer people who have to do it again. Can 3 people here stand up and say that the hate that we saw in the Capitol is not okay, and don't make us do it? And we had 3 people stand up. And I think that's important. It's not a trans person's responsibility to go out and educate the world what trans is. That's not, that weight shouldn't be on their shoulders, that they have to go and explain to everybody what trans is.
And these kids shouldn't have to be perfect and be top of their class and star athletes in order to be seen, or that they deserve fundamental rights. Yeah.
Right.
I guess I would, if I could leave you with anything, that we really need people to show up for us. These hearings are brutal, and listening to things that people are saying about our kids, it is awful. And it's even people were just willing to call or write and say, I don't know a lot about this, but I hate what I'm seeing. We would be so grateful.
Yeah.
Thank you both so much for being on the show today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Representative.
Thank you so much for listening. If you like what you heard, please subscribe, rate, and review us. To contact me, email rep.andrew.gray@akleg.gov or call our office at 907-465-4940.